I'm Katie, and you're listening to Nack Goes to the Movies, the one-stop shop podcast for all things movies, TV, and pop culture.
Turns out he's a major cinephile. They don't watch enough movies! It's a very simple formula! And here we go. Hey you, welcome to Nack Goes to the Movies, the fine, sublime wine equivalent for movie and TV show podcast. Now, if you were anticipating a Walking Dead nightcap ender for our final two-part catch-up, know that I really want to get that in before Season 11 started, but instead, we'll be waiting for the conclusion of Season 11 sometime next year and the series for that episode. These past few weeks have been... they've taken a huge toll on my mental health, and instead I needed some new horror fare for my feel-good dose of medicine. And with this podcast spawning during the pandemic, in August of 2020, to be specific, the 1-year anniversary that we're celebrating should be a momentous occasion relating to the way this began, More American Horror Story. While the next full season double feature is still a few days away, I figured now would be as good a time as any to get into the Hulu FX spin-off series that just wrapped up Season 1 in American Horror Stories, plural there, not just story. For those who do not know, this series is for the most part self-contained stories with some tie-ins to the main series and other episodes, as opposed to a more linear one-season arc. So a different format of show means we'll be doing something only done a few times here in a episode-by-episode breakdown. It will be a little bit stream of conscious, so I think we've done a few episodes like that in the past, and there are a ton of new actors, so let's get into it with some of the returners as well. So we know the main show will bring back Evan Peters and Sarah Paulson after they both took a sabbatical from 1984. We have some returners here in this spin-off series with both Billie Lourd, one of the new Bright Spot mainstays, and Dylan McDermott, who has only been in a handful of series after Murder House, but is actually reprising his original character here, which, yes, means another trip to Murder House. I mean, we knew that Rubber Suit was back after all the promotional material, so it was only a matter of time. While that is the most of the AHS mainstays we get, I'll sprinkle a few more in as we go. I really do wish they could bring back like Kate Mara just into the fold, even if it's a small role, as a full role for one of these other seasons. Some of the new ads are very fun, and we'll get into those, but I feel like Kate Mara was so good in Season 1, and I wish she could be back. Many will know of Aaron Tveit as one of the best parts of Les Mis, and rightly so. But what y'all may not know is he's actually, a former Ithaca bomber. That's right, he went to my alma mater in Ithaca College, so how about that? And he's in a few episodes here. Everyone knows who Danny Trejo is. IMDb lists his acting role numbers at 407, with some things as announced, others in pre-production. But either way, he's been in everything from Spy Kids to Breaking Bad and From Dusk Till Dawn. He is quite good. His role in this is something to behold that I will wait till his episode to get into. And while there has been a bit of a pause in cinema horror for a little bit, it's important to bring up Vanessa Williams, who has a small role in this show, but has a huge footprint on the horror genre. When they announced the Candyman reboot, I was pretty jazzed for it. The original is creepy, scary, and super different. This is just like that fun moment of having Tony Todd, the original Candyman, be a part of Scream Season 3. Vanessa Williams played Annie McCree McCoy in the first Candyman and will be reprising that role in the new film coming out next week. Yes, that is going to be the episode for next week. But having her in this show is a nice little tease for next week's horror episode. Still don't know why the horror genre helps me. It may be an overstimulation of the senses, but that will be a fun psychology problem for me to solve one of these days. But enough introspective thought. I could be doing that all day if we need to, unfortunately. You're here so I can talk horror things at you, so let's stay together and not split up and see if these stories are worth diving into. With Rubber Woman, which is part 1 and part 2, so the first 2 episodes are more of a true contained story as opposed to everything else we get here. I don't know how many times we can revisit Murder House. Every single time we see it, I'm always super happy. That show has had some up and down seasons throughout. What show hasn't, right? The League was pretty gosh darn good throughout, but AHS has, for the most part, had good enough seasons, minus, of course, Roanoke. That season blows. But season 1 of this original show, every other road trip this story took to this house is just sensational. Now, the biggest issue with a show like this, especially starting off not only 1, but 2 back-to-back episodes doing a bit of a retread, is going to be challenging, especially since we have been to Murder House and seen the rubber suit and all the sex and scares before. Does anything feel different enough here? Sure, the characters are literally different, and is a very different paternal relationship. I mean, Ryan Murphy shows generally and regularly blur the lines between, sex and violence. Thankfully, it never feels too over the top and off-putting, but doesn't necessarily feel drastically different from what we have come to expect either. The whole rubber-suited possession killer thing, while unique in its own right, somehow feels a bit repetitive, especially to those who are AHS aficionados. I mean, hopefully you're not starting your AHS journey with stories. That would be a huge misstep. I mean, look, this show talks a lot about trauma and grief and all that stuff, and I love the psychology and trauma being discussed in most horror things. And, this show quickly throws that into it. There's the horror, the sexuality to mix in for, a very interesting blend, a little cocktail you got going on. I mean, the psychology angle partially existed in the first season with Dr. Ben Harmon being a psychiatrist. Like, that's something. But like I said, the similarities are there. And this show could have avoided Murder House. Yes, it draws you in and feels right at home with the series. But this is not a fully pro or con. I know there is a 3-episode arc with Murder House, but the condensed story is a bit strange. You kind of wonder what it all could have been with just starting with something fresh. I don't know. 1 episode in, you kind of wish there was a little bit more separation. AHS, and this is going to be strange, just like Game of Thrones. Hear me out. If you think something is going to work out, more likely than not, it will not. Game of Thrones is Lord of the Rings if everything went wrong. Teen romance and AHS, yeah, right. That ish ain't working out at all. Sarah McCormick didn't start out strong for me, but she ended up really growing on me by the end of the episode. I mean, she is no Tasia Farmiga. Look, we've already talked about her parentage and the Farmiga woman being staple actors in the horror world, be it The Conjurings or this, even though Tasia was in the worst of the actual Conjuring movies as far as I'm concerned, because we know we don't count La La La, no. But her, Sienna McCormick, leaning a bit more into the darkness is a nice separation and change of pace for the daughter in the family staying at Murder House currently. It takes ages to get to the gore, but this episode does come into its own a bit more by the end. Even if the bad group of girls still feels familiar to season 1 of Murder House, the music cues, ghosts of previously dead characters and all, but these characters aren't mind-blowingly familiar, unfortunately, so they more just feel like costumes and background things at this point. And lastly, to the very first AHS episode, remember when Christian Serratos was in Murder House for 1 whole episode as one of the bully girls? I went through her whole IMDb page and there's such an interesting journey between a ton of Twilights, Ned's declassified as Susie Crabgrass, and of course her long-standing relationship with the show that I will one day get back to on this podcast, The Walking Dead. Rubber Woman Part 2. Maybe it's just that every episode in this season of a spin-off will just start out crazy slow. I honestly didn't realize what I was watching and wondered if I skipped ahead for a moment. The whole lack of specific episode thing is a bit jarring at times, especially when it goes to say, hey, we have all these self-contained isolated stories, but clearly they didn't because they started with 2 that are a 2-part episode. I mean, this feels like something that could have been a whole longer season. I don't know if it would have been a great longer season. If it was a whole season, it would have 100% felt like a retread. But like I said, they condensed it into a few episodes. It feels a bit fun since the first season was so good, but at times you just wonder if you get the same thing out of just rewatching that. Now, like Thor Dark World, I know it's a tough subject to bring up for you MCU fans. You gotta watch every inch of the full franchise to get the entire unabridged storyline. Some of this stuff sucks you in. I don't think the entire PLL and Perfectionist series as a whole was particularly good, but I had to know who the final 8 was. If there's something I forgot, It is, as you know, I know we're both Ithaca bombers, but I somehow forgot what Aaron Tevitt looked like. I thought he was one of the two dads in the first episode, but to find out he was a contractor from the second one, I mean, old-time France costumes and makeup can really make you look different. But I was actually all about his small, messed-up contractor role here. The first part of this two-parter was about, their daughter. This part was more about the two husbands. Now, a ton of these beats still are similar to the first season, of course they are. And no Evan Peters and Sarah Paulson is a bit unfortunate, obviously. I mean, you kind of were like, maybe we'll see Tate somewhere in here. I mean, the student murder thing, right? Same as before. The strained relationship of their parents. It was all played out in season 1. It was probably done better overall with, more ghost gore. And of course, the show still had Jessica Lange, one of the early staples along with Peters and Paulson. And while she has been away from the main show for quite some time, only having a brief comeback to reprise the role in AHS Apocalypse when they revisited Murder House, she will always have a huge presence and lasting power to the show overall. You will always think of her as far as I'm concerned when you think of AHS. I do wish there were a few more overall ties to the full first season using the same house and setting. That will always be something I'll clamor for. Now, all that being said, yes, this is mad similar, but the parent death reveal and all the spirits, discovering all the dead girls' bodies in the wall, there's a lot of good and fun here. I also have to say Kaya Gerber, who is super new to the acting circuit, more in the model world, she's so good in this world. I think she's going to be maybe in the latest AHS full season. I hope so. I mean, I just discovered Neil McDonough, who I love and is super underrated of an actor, is in that too. I hope he brings it in the new Resident Evil movie. That series really needs a nice kick in the butt to get going. But Gerber is really so good in this series. At times, American Horror Story, and maybe the genre as a whole, can be a little heartwarming. They're supposed to be a, controlled, I even say this in the show, a controlled roller coaster of fear that when you're done, it kind of brings you back and you feel a little bit better afterwards. And while this story feels a bit rushed, to be expected in a 2-episode arc, we'll get to the 3rd episode later, which will be something, unfortunately. There are some really nice moments between our series lead, her ghost parents, and her ghost girlfriend. And to mix it up a bit from Murder House before, someone actually makes it through the series without being a house ghost. The series is all a bit, air quotes, darker based on its lead just being darker overall, but even the love shines through in a really cute way to remind me of the end fate of, spoiler alert, Will and Elizabeth in Pirates of the Caribbean. Gosh, they need to get that 4th one on a Disney Plus ASAP. I know that's the one that has neither of them, but like I said, you just want the whole slate of 5 movies at a point. So yeah, while not the strongest overall, and I will say I don't know how rewatchable this series is going to be, there are some bright spots. But, the next 4 episodes are very much one-offs on their own, so let's, kind of dive in and see what more was advertised as when we got what this show was supposed to be. The movie, the title in question for episode 3, Drive-In. So, starting with the Bob Ross painting is a fun way to kick anything off. Movie, show, you name it. I don't know how into this premise I was to start. I mean, as a big movie and TV person, I don't think I can watch anything like The Ring. I love the visual media too much to have it ruined for me by thinking one thing, some scary demon lady is going to come out of the TV. I think that is The Ring, at least. I'm not actually sure. But once again, at times this feels familiar. I mean, the original AHS seasons all were fairly unique to their niche genres and settings like a haunted house, asylum, and more. Sure, 1984 may have felt super familiar, but gosh darn it, I love that setting and the season. That was the reason I got into the show at all. So that type of movie or show will always get a pass for me as far as I'm concerned. But Cursed Movie is a story that has obviously been done before. But the discussion of horror film and arousal, an interesting debate that has, happened in a litany of genre films, including the beginning of Scream 2. And it's something that I might be curious to read up on a little more. But if we talk about stuff like this, if I was in this movie, and it's always, foresight, hindsight, all the fun stuff, heck no am I watching a haunted movie or staying over in a haunted house. I may be depressed AF, but I do not need those type of questions answered. And I don't sleep a whole lot anyway, and being conscious in a haunted house or Haunted Anything for 24 hours plus does not feel like it, and at all for me. That being said, I am super excited to watch some more horror movies in theaters. I don't think that's asking for trouble. I feel like I've only done a few purges, so you chalked it up to how scary those really are. But with the new Candyman and the latest Halloween upcoming, I'm very excited for more scares in the theaters late at night. Ooh, gonna be a hoot of a time. Also, totally forgot to mention John Carroll Lynch in this. I feel like I forget to mention him a lot when I think of, this series and the parent series American Horror Story. He too is a huge mention for the overall AHS pantheon of recurring actors. His Twisty the Clown was easily one of the scariest parts of any season to date. 1984 was pretty good with the twist there with his character. But while he's only in one of these spin-off stories, I enjoy his character being at the center of a topic I hold near and dear to my heart, and have seemingly for ages done that. Middle school, high school, and even into college, Nick wrote most papers on two subjects: legalization of marijuana and violence in movies/video games having no correlation to real-life violence. So yeah, many term papers later, here I am using this form of content to relax and de-stress from all the unfortunate things life throws at me. Wow, am I getting realer and realer on this week's episode. Not what I was intending to do, but that's what happens. Like I said, a real trying few weeks. Also, the opening credits look, for the horror drive-in, and it's a sight to behold with how the blood rejuvenates all the rusted cars and the rusted movie theater drive-in. What better way to do this? It ties the theme in so well, and it's way better than the rubber people intros of the previous two episodes. Also, while I have started going to more theaters overall since they opened up again, I am definitely curious about going to a drive-in theater again. The real question is finding someone to go with, right? Any takers? I mean, I'm going to the movies by myself anyway, so we'll see. I don't know if you can do that for drive-in. I feel like that wouldn't be as fun. If there is one thing I did not need, because the anticipation was actually a nice build, was all these close-ups of eye shots becoming all bled over. Eyes are mad weird. I will never be a contacts person, glasses for life, and all the eye needle shots and other horror things are not big spider bad, but pretty gosh darn close if you ask me. Well, I super don't like that kind of stuff. There is a dark irony of Eye Patch Lady immediately getting her other eye stabbed out, like in, I think, Kill Bill Part 2. As a zombie fan, even the worst one, which may be Black Summer on Netflix, TBD on Season 2, but as far as I'm concerned, that's the worst thing I've seen in a while. This feels right at home, and something I wish we could get a whole season with on HS. This kind of becomes that. I don't know what the full zombie season would look like, but I'd love to see it. I guess overall, this was more like 28 days and weeks later being more of a rage virus and the zombies, in air quotes, being super killable. There is a fun part to this not being the end, but having an interaction and confrontation with the film director littered with crazy film speak. The film buff in me loves it. So I like this on-off story. I really did. It actually was a fun, unique, and clearly unresolved story. A bit more unique, of course, than the Rubber Woman stories, but these are all just a bit inconsistent, and they start off super slow. It's tough to make a super engaging 40-minute story that stands on its own merits, but I put a lot of hope and expectation into the next episode. Also, last point, the end moment of the Curse movie popping up on Netflix was a stroke of genius for a final end. Gotcha. The one I was most excited for when I looked at what it could be is the Naughty List. First things first, who doesn't want Santa Trejo? Danny Trejo has a brief but memorable role in Breaking Bad, and somehow his Spy Kids character is connected to a much more violent character, the same character, in Machete. And somehow, Danny Trejo being a terrifying Santa Claus is everything I could have ever wanted. And I had no clue how badly I wanted this. I mean, this was my reaction to the cast list for Predators, which he was also in for a super brief moment. Immediately, I'm in love with how much the Naughty List episode of American Horror Stories makes so much fun of influencer culture. Is it even a parody if it's just the same thing? This feels like they could get away with TikTok found footage to kick it off. As a TikTok influencer myself, gosh, I'm not even close, I get it. Also, how about Kevin McHale, aka Artie from Glee, being an influencer in this? I mean, even the blend of gore, Christmas, and social media influencer, stuff, is a lovely blend that I'm super here for. Let's go darker social media parody comeuppance. I love a good horror Christmas crossover. The genre is super limited outside of maybe Black Christmas and Krampus, which was more of a comedy horror. But you are gleefully waiting for some chickens to come home to roost for these influencers who can't stop. And there is something fun about Video Artie as the voice of reason that is just not going to be heard. I feel like the video people never get their love or respect being behind the camera. But as one of them, I feel your pain, Artie from Glee. I know I could just call him Kevin, but it's so hard to separate the two. And seeing him with a bucket hat and short shorts all decked out in the finest internet influencer chic, it's so jarring. But I love his move from Glee to slasher fare, even if it is brief. And this is one of the first ones where you're crazy anticipating all the bad things to transpire to the main group of characters. Even the Rubber Woman, there was some positive things. The influencer group, minus Artie, not so much. Although you could say he gave him a platform, but what it is. And Mall Santa Trejo coming to the rescue to take out these influencers, ruining his Christmas event, love to see it. The build-up makes his character so vile, and when it was revealed this Mall Santa is just a serial killer dressing up as a bunch of Mall Santas, and seeing all the gore around it, OMG, I am all about it. I know this episode is one of the worst ranked in the short series, but I enjoyed the heck out of it, and the modern riff of, everything. I chalk this up to enjoying things that are so bad they are good. No, this isn't good, but it is still, bad funny. Yes, I do want to watch Santa Trejo kill influencers, and the end is pretty funny. I enjoyed the heck out of this. I don't care. Guilty pleasure away. Next episode is Baal. As far as name actors go for both the genre and the main show, this has both Billie Lourd and Vanessa Williams in the 5th episode. So while the plot may be a little less outlandish this time around, the motivations are pretty normal. A couple who can't get pregnant takes a chance on a small idol for help with pregnancy, and while it works, the challenges of parenting are brought up, and now there is this desire to not have a kid at all. I do like Billie Lourd in everything. Star Wars, American Horror Story, and Scream Queens, which, please, someone confirm that season 3 is actually happening. Come on. While the genre fare of haunting a couple with a newborn is not necessarily my cup of tea, the scares are as good as can be because of this innate fear of things when kids, especially babies, are in danger. I don't know. This episode may be a bit different and not as insanely wacky as the previous 4, but there are some real heartwarming emotional connections between the new mother and their baby, the ups and downs of motherhood, and the supernatural haunting aspect that pairs with these creepy idols. I mean, our first look at the demon is the baby monitor. You're never seeing it, but it's just because it's not in person doesn't make it any less scary. It's very good. This definitely feels a little bit I think it's the first Annabelle that's very much that's the pickled mustard thing that I still haven't really tried. The jump scares, just like that movie in this episode, are pretty good. Now that I'm thinking about all of this a bit more, the story is a bit familiar to some of the Conjurings and more haunting house things. The wife seems to be haunted, the husband is absent, and the baby is not doing so great, being constantly visited by a demonic entity. Or so it seems. We'll get to it. We'll get there. I mean, there are no possessions in this episode. But, in the genre, as it were, those normally come at the end of these movies anyway. It was always going to be tricky to get these full stories into one episode, excluding all the emphasis placed on the Rubber Woman arc. I thought that the movie thing was pretty complete. It had more to go, but it was good enough. The Santa episode was good for me, but I would have more loved the placement of importance being on Santa instead of Bro House. I would have easily watched a whole season of Danny Trejo as a killer Santa. I mean, Asylum even had a killer Santa, played to perfection, albeit briefly, by the legend Ian McShane. Maybe just an entire horror Christmas episode or season would be fire. I mean, we got an episode, but I want a whole season. Yeah, let's not stop an episode. Let's ask for the world. Whole horror Christmas season. Come on, AHS, make it happen. This episode is good. You know, it has the atmosphere you'd want. But when anyone pulls out like a Ouija board, you know things are going to be a bad time. I will never, and I mean never, touch one of those. As you remember from my episode with Katie about the Conjuring duology 2-part episode of the entire franchise. Also, unrelated, Virginia Gardner only has a small role in this episode, but she is one of the many bright spots of the Halloween reboot. That was also the inciting incident to me trying banh mi sandwiches, so how about that? Since I am writing the whole episode stream of consciousness-wise, the twist was sensational. I mean, which one, right? We'll go in chronological order. Having everyone in on messing with this wife to get her money, and all the guys acting buddies and what they bring to it. It kind of was like the Mysterio thing in that second Spider-Man movie. Holy shit, that twist was amazing and unexpected. From his friends making up the whole things, and I mean, they even call it like, oh, gaslighting, what a show it would be, right? Like, have all the ways to make the guy infertile, to like smoke machines, to carving statues, to people dressing up as the demon. Wild stuff. The darkness of man is truly special. And seeing that comeuppance of everyone getting fucked up by the real demon, from spine ripping and more, is a truly special moment. And the gore is sublime to behold, even if it's all pushed in at the end. Even after that, there was another change of pace fake out with, you know, Billie Lourd's character getting the last laugh, having been given a real ritual to summon the demon and controlling it for her revenge. You wondered how that husband made it out, but lo and behold, that demon was under her control. And, you know, that with her, like, seemingly controlling this demon and, you know, the sex part at the end with it, just wild stuff. This was easily the best episode of the bunch, even if it wasn't the most outlandish and fun compared to the movie theater and Santa episodes. Murder House stuff, once again, that was good, but there were only so much when you're kind of feels like it's retread stuff. I don't know if I had any expectations for Feral. You know, family camp stuff doesn't necessarily draw me in. I mean, it does make me think of the latest slasher season that makes me ponder, like, maybe I should get Shudder one of these days. I guess it's also a little bit like Harper's Island. None of those are all much more bigger scale family getaways at grander areas. This is more one-off, isolated, you know, outdoorsy camping. But Harper's Island, super underrated show that I saw much later on CWC. I had heard about it when I was in high school, never got into it, but man, when I finally did watch it, super underrated show. That the things that you can find on CW Seed, which it has every so often you'll find a gem, you know, like there's the NBC Constantine show, which is on there, which makes sense because of Arrow. Very good one-season show that I think Matt Ryan is best in. Wish that could get another season at some point. Like there's the old gem of the Sticky Fingers Blade show, but Harper's Island had Katie Cassidy and feels like a darker revenge, and that show is like, I know no one's heard of it, but you really should get into it, especially if you like the book or the miniseries of And Then There Were None. But this episode actually gives us another Aaron Tveit sighting, as well as Cody Fern coming back to the world of AHS. I didn't recognize the name at first, but he is Michael Langdon from one of the best seasons of AHS and Apocalypse, and he came back in a much goofier role as one of the counselors in 1984. So he's used to some horror camp scene stuff. There is some real nice natural beauty, but this is like, you know, they're doing some high-end camping life. I mean, they brought their own outdoor, like, toilet tent setup, and they have a whole electric light setup. As a former camp counselor who was way bougier, I love it. There's a lot going on story-wise. Crazy people outside, like in the resurgence of the Resident Evil video game franchise, or the worst full season of American Horror Story in Roanoke. There's also some parent stuff with like a missing kid that all feels a bit similar, even if it doesn't have a specific place of origin. But anytime people are yelling to find their kid, I'll always think of Heavy Rain and Jason, a game that was mostly good, even if it was a bit goofy to start. A lot of video game talk for this episode. This is another one of those I will never be in situation settings of getting like creepy wooded stuff. I do enjoy Ranger Cody Fern in this, and the eeriness is pretty good. The first clear shot of all the feral people is also like, this is a scary episode. I mean, the conspiracy theories of like all this stuff happening all over these parks and the rangers being set up. Like, it's insane that they were made just to contain these feral cannibal people. I mean, it is similar to the episode about turning people into zombies things, but, you know, a little bit different. But somehow this is the most unbelievable of all the episodes. And I know that's crazy to think, but it's just like the matter of off the cuff way that they say all this stuff. But the Aussie Ranger, played by the former Antichrist, and the cannibal gore is like a wild ride. I mean, somehow their son is the leader of the feral people. You knew he was going to come back in some way, even though he doesn't care. And, you know, through all the craziness, he turns his new family, gets to eat his old family for dinner. I mean, this episode is bonkers. Yes, there are some familiar parts to the awful Roanoke season, and it wasn't my like most enjoyable episode watch, but this was a gosh darn good episode. I may have eventually had more fun with those first 4 episodes, but these last like 2 really brought the fucked up parts back to the franchise, which is always going to be a little part of AHS. I mean, remember how the Lady Gaga hotel season started? That was pretty gosh darn messed up if you asked me. Oh, I hate to talk about it. Game over. Episode 7 does bring us back to Murder House. Maybe, if you can count it. But Dylan McDermott's back. There is a lot of things back. Now, this episode, the entire thing is too meta. And I love meta things with Scream, but, you know, with AHS being a canon show in the world, referencing both Bloody Face, Sister Jude, like this alone was a little weird up front. It mixed things up too much, and it really was tough to follow. Besides this all being a little too familiar, Season 1 had the setting, Season 2 and like the Adam Levine part of exploring something haunted and being aroused by horror, and Roanoke being its own weird thing. Once again, I really don't like Roanoke. I don't see that changing with another rewatch, but somehow all this meta AHS talk in an AHS show is less endearing and fun compared to the Scream movies with their spoof franchise inside their own world being Stab. I love it there, but somehow not so much here, because it aggressively blends what's real and what's not real in the world of the show, where, yeah, Scream 4 started that way, but pretty quickly you realize what was in Scream and what was in the movies in Scream and Stab, and that, like, there was no aggressive line blurring. This, who knows what's real and what's not. It's that, now I know what's real and not. That's another one of those old TikTok trends, because I am an influencer, even if I said I wasn't. Of course I am. Have you seen my TikTok? Anyway, side note, I love watching scary things. That doesn't feel like a side note. That feels like just a fact. You know, maybe I'd enjoy a haunted house more now. I think I've been to like one real one at Universal way back in 2013 in California. But I feel like I would for sure not be about anything that was actually haunted, that had a history to it. There was something kind of fun about all these characters coming en masse to AHS Murder House, and something like breaking down how this doesn't make sense given the existing lore. But I mean, it was a little fun seeing Twisty and Bloody Face and having Adelia Langdon like back just to say that line, I told you were going to die. It's like kind of funny. But after that moment of not knowing really what's happening, the reveal to it being a video game, boy, did I dislike that. And as a video game person myself, I'm a bit annoyed by the fake out. The credits are a nice video game touch, even if it doesn't make sense there, because guess what? It wouldn't make sense anyway. Like, I'm not happy about this. This plot ruins so many things. It makes you question a lot. And, like, the why makes no sense. I mean, seeing the show's menu listing of other AHS seasons and having even this current show appear on the listing in the thing is too much. The lines of reality and the meta versions of this world aren't just blurring. They're crashing together. I love Dylan McDermott being back to his old OG character, if it even is him, but who knows what it is. I mean, clearly he's recognized as an actor, but not as the person until it is. Like, in general, I like him when he's on camera in this series. You know, Murder House, Asylum, 1984, all good. But this version of the OG character was always going to be the best. I mean, some people might appreciate this. Some people may even thought this was an episode with the intention of a love letter to the series. But I really think this is one Black Mirror episode, like, gone wrong that just misses the mark. The first 2 episodes were a bit of a rehash, but good enough. The third and fourth were different and fun. Maybe not executed super well, but unique and fun enough. 5 and 6 were probably the most messed up. Maybe not the most fun, but for sure the best from an analytics and overall genre setup standpoint. But this episode was clearly just not as strong. Now the arc of the rubber woman and her significant other who can't die with her ghost girlfriend and like the family in the house, like it all burns down, and you think all the people who've died in Murder House being burned down. Like, think of that for the moment as if that's what actually happened. The wrap-up feels a bit rushed for, that mostly 3-episode arc, especially with 4 filler episodes in the middle. I mean, I want to see what happens to Scarlet. I was invested in her because they made her the main character for 2 whole episodes. But I don't know, where they can go with her character. Is season 2, is she going to be the big part of it, of this new experimental show? It has a second season renewal. Haunted condos and the lone spirit there for that relationship is something, I guess. Yes, there are some emotions felt at the end of like that relationship. And yeah, I don't love this huge stakes built up world moment of the entire murder house being blown up, especially with the entire thing like happening so quickly. And then, yeah, it's saying, okay, all these spirits left and, moved on except for this one. And maybe I was okay with that being the come up, right? The video game thing was just a strange beginning and everything else was real and happened. But apparently that's bullshit. It's all a joke and nothing matters since it was all a video game. I don't even know if this is a mindfuck or just bad writing or what is all a video game. I'm actually pissed with this since it makes the whole season, especially the 3 Murder House episodes, seem fake. Like, now you wonder if anything's real in American Horror Story. I mean, you could just not watch this and not have this internalized question. I mean, I like the individual episodes, but the way to end the one longer running story being almost all a dream, like, does Scarlet even exist? Is Murder House actually destroyed or not destroyed? It's something I'm not about. Gosh, I was talking so positive until that last final moment. That's the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. So yeah, this was not the strongest way to get AHS out there for you to consume. Like, most of it I enjoyed, and even, the ones that were a little touch and go were fine. I really think season 7 ruined it because it had a chance to wrap things up and go to the future, but now I have no clue if anything exists anymore, and that's a little bit frustrating. Like, normally I'm just craving American Horror Story content, and like, you could say this is a good enough appetizer for the next full season of that. But that last episode really sours it all a little bit for you. But what was your favorite one-off episode? I'm sure it wasn't Game Over. Let me know on social at either Knickknack Movies or Knickknack_IC on Twitter, TikTok, Letterboxd, and Instagram. So cheers, and until next time, cinephiles. Are you not entertained? I think this is going to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later, alligator.